Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Loopcast, Catholic Vote's weekly rundown of all things faith, culture, and politics. And this week, we got a full slate. We're going to be touching on anti-Catholic church violence, Father James Martin being confusing, the Mark Houck trial that started this week, the March for Life, and then the response from Biden and Kamala Harris, and then moving into the Twilight Zone. So we at Catholic Vote really have owned this issue that is not getting enough press. And the issue I'm talking about is that Catholic churches have been constantly attacked for 3 years, almost an attack a day, and no one is talking about it. So, Erica, what is the big push this week coming from Catholic Vote? Why is it a priority to everyone?
Sure. So we're in the middle of a campaign right now to bring this topic to greater public awareness and to really put the pressure on Congress, now that we have a Republican House, to investigate and to push the Department of Justice to investigate the rise in violence against Catholic churches in particular. So since May of 2020, when the George Floyd riots started, there have been 278 attacks as of this recording, and we're adding about 3 every week. So for 3 years, we have seen an average of 3 attacks every week on a Catholic church, either, everything from arson to vandalism in terms of spray painting, pro-abortion, anti-Catholic satanic symbols, chopping off statues' hands and heads. And the Catholic Vote tracker is updated several times a week whenever there is a new attack. So anyone who wants to find out and stay alerted to the latest on this story, definitely go and check that out. We'll drop it in the show notes as usual. But I think that the most disturbing thing about this has been the utter silence from the Department of Justice in terms of addressing and even acknowledging this rise in violence against the Catholic Church in particular.
It's not like we haven't alerted them, right? I mean, Josh,
Correct.
You know better than me. We've talked to the Department of Justice a few times now. What's the history of our correspondence with the Department of Justice and the Biden administration?
Well, so Brian Birch, president of Catholic Vote, sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland. This was back in December of 2021, after there had been so many attacks, as you mentioned, especially since May of 2020, over a year and a half, and there just wasn't that much action on it. In fact, the U.S. bishops had done the first job of tracking the amount of violence, and they published this big report in October of 2021. And after a few months after they did that, we noticed that nobody at the Department of Justice or the FBI was saying or doing anything. And we thought it was time to put pressure to bear. And, I don't know, maybe the FBI didn't see the USCCB press release. I mean, whatever. So we sent them a letter, and it took them, about a month and a half to get back to us. They sent us a letter, for the Associate Attorney General, Vanita Gupta, and she said in her letter that the Department of Justice was planning on taking swift action on this.
They were aware of the problem. They were aware of it.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to get the exact quote here. We share your concern with and commitment to preventing and addressing acts of vandalism, property destruction, and other incidents that target religious symbols, shrines, statues, or churches. The department is taking numerous steps to address such violence, consistent with our commitment to combat unlawful acts of hate in all their forms. This letter was dated January 28th, 2022. That means this upcoming Saturday, some people are going to be listening to this on Saturday, marks the 1-year anniversary since this letter. And you have to ask yourself, what have they said? What have they done? Who have they prosecuted? Who have they arrested? And it's not total, utter, complete 0% silence. Okay, so here's what they actually did do. Last week, the FBI sent out a press release offering a reward. What did they offer a reward for? Well, here's the funny thing. Their press release was so skewed. It said they announced a $25,000 reward for information in a series of attacks, quote, against reproductive health service facilities. That was their headline in the press release. And in fact, that was the headline in ABC News and all these other secular news reports. They all made it sound like, oh, the FBI is going after people who attack abortion facilities.
Abortion clinics.
It's like, now, wait a minute. So actually, if you get down read like the 7th or 8th paragraph down, it actually clarifies that the reward is for information leading to, any arrest involving reproductive health service buildings and also pregnancy resource centers and churches. So they only combine it all way at the bottom. They are totally downplaying it. In the secular media absolutely ran with it. They ran with the headline that the FBI gave. And so it's one of those things where there have been very few attacks on abortion facilities in the last 2 years. And there's been lots of attacks on pregnancy resource centers and lots of attacks on churches. And so we want the FBI and the Department of Justice to take it seriously. We don't want any of this downplaying it like they did in their press release and just offering a reward. We want people in jail. We want people prosecuted. And we want a commitment from our federal government that this kind of violence is not acceptable.
Yeah, and I just want to add too, when we talk about attacks, what do we mean? The type of people that have been attacking Catholic churches have been brazen and obvious. Like, these people have been caught on security cameras. They're spray painting Jane's Revenge, a group that's a part of it. It's not like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to find who these people are and what they're doing. We have the information, and yet we've gotten no press releases, reports on any type of prosecution for hate crimes. And I think it's indicative of what the administration really thinks of hate crimes. But so, for everyone's information, CatholicVote actually put together a video. I'm not just a pretty face here on the host. I actually was part of editing the video.
He does real work. Yeah.
I'm on the edge of my wits here. I just finished it up. But this video shows just how, we're talking about arson attacks, burning down churches. We're talking about cutting off statues' heads, putting swastikas on churches, calling priests rapists, like the most vile, disgusting actions on places of worship, stuff that's threatening nobody. Pregnancy resource centers, places that are actually there to just help women. And so I think two issues here. One, the fact that it's been kind of in specific locations across the country. They've all been covered by local news stations. So we're not talking about maybe like Fox affiliates, not really. This isn't, the New York Times coming out and saying, whoa, there's been 300 of them. It's been individual here, individual here, individual here. So I don't even think Catholics really understand how widespread this is.
I agree with you.
How there's been an attack almost every day.
Yeah, the narrative has been so limited, and people are not aware that, maybe someone whose parish was attacked. I know that my parish was one of the first ones during the summer of 2020 to suffer attacks and vandalism and graffiti. But the idea that you're part of this larger pattern that has now touched, I think it's like 46 of the 50 states, and we've seen it ramping up. So another thing I want to point out to people that they don't realize is that of those nearly 300 attacks, 121 of them have occurred since just last May. And that, of course, is directly in reaction to the Dobbs leak that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. And who do they attack first? Well, it's the Catholic Church, because pro-abortion activists see the Catholic Church as the institution, the presence in the United States that is most effective at promoting human life and the dignity of the unborn child. And so these attacks have not, and this was after CV's exchange with the DOJ. So not only did the DOJ say nothing, they actually stood by, put their hands in their pockets, and watched while those attacks on our churches ramped up. Right. And they still have done nothing. So the Dobbs
leak, as you say, was in May. And then after May gets done, Jane's Revenge, the slogan, you're not safe if we're not safe.
If abortions aren't safe, you're not safe either.
Yeah. And they said, as May came to a close last year, May 2022, they said the month of mercy is over, and they declared, now the leash is off, and we will make it as hard as possible for your campaign of oppression to continue. We have demonstrated in the past month how easy and fun it is to attack. And so you think, why doesn't the FBI and the Department of Justice declare this a domestic terrorist group? They are trying. That's exactly what terrorism is. Like, they're trying to intimidate people. I mean, what more do you need? There was an attempted assassination on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and and
they're still outside of his house.
Yeah,
by the
they're
way.
still protesting it.
Mhm.
At
Yeah.
what point, does the government have a responsibility to protect its citizens? Like, hello, I think Catholics and all people of goodwill must hold the FBI and the Department of Justice accountable for failing to take this seriously.
Totally.
If, just imagine this, if this issue were, if the secular media were pro-life, then the New York Times, the Washington Post would be covering this constantly. It would be on CNN every day. You'd have a 60-minute special on CBS, but instead you get total silence.
Mhm.
The only people who've really covered this is Fox News because they're on the conservative side of things, right? But I got to be thankful. There's a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill that have talked about this issue. They pledged that they're going to hold hearings on this. And we're right there to support that effort because we think this is what it needs.
Absolutely.
And we've had people in Congress and also Fox News citing the Catholic Vote trackers on this. So this is important work. We're happy to be
I'd like to add,
fighting for them.
I'd like to add, this is all, the only reason this can happen is because of you, because of people that are in the loop and who support us to be able to be in the position we're submitting this video that we made to Congress. We're in active conversations with congressmen, congresswomen about how we can find solutions to this. And honestly, there were so many people that they didn't know who to turn to when their church got attacked. And they knew that, Catholic Vote has a tracker and a big microphone so we can reach other Catholics, make people aware, hey, this is reality and this is what's going on in the country. They would submit them to us. We had our Sue field the emails and then pass them along to us. We're like, wow,
shout out to Sue.
Didn't see it anywhere else. So I just really, I want to commend everyone. Thank you so much for making this possible and giving us the opportunity. And you mentioned, Josh, if the media, secular media was pro-life, right? One would like to think too, if we had a Catholic president, we do have a Catholic president supposedly. He has not said a word about these specific attacks on Catholic churches. He said in very blanket statements through his press secretary that he condemns hate attacks or unlawful protesting, whatever. But just think about that for a second. If you were a Catholic and someone is attacking your house of worship, like imagine if this was mosques across the country being attacked and you were Muslim, it would be extra personal to you. You would think that you would come out and with your microphone and unequivocally call out and deny people in the country that are attacking. Like, this is your home, this is your backyard. So I just also want to say it's just really cowardly for the president of the United States, who is Catholic, to not say a word about this. And we at Catholic Vote have to be the ones pressing someone. This should be your issue.
I will say, though, I do consider it a badge of honor that people who love to kill babies understand that it is the Catholic Church that stands against that. We are against that barbarism. You're darn right we are. We think babies deserve a chance to live. Like, what a crazy concept, huh? So I mean, they're not going after the Unitarians. I mean, come on. They understand that, we stand, in solidarity with our unborn brothers and sisters. We wish them to the chance at life.
It does make me proud to be Catholic. And it really, I think, acknowledges something that the devil hates what's true. The devil has identified, there's a lot of spiritual warfare going on, and it has identified the Catholic Church as being the biggest enemy against the forces of evil. So it is a badge of honor in a lot of ways. And so
I know which side I want to be on.
I know which side I want to be on. And actually, we were all at the March for Life. We're going to address this later, but it's so beautiful to see just such a large gathering of Catholics and people of goodwill across the country come across in the defense of the defenseless. So we move on into our next section here. Actually, I'm coining it Answer the Inbox. So we actually received a few emails, a few good questions. I picked one of them out that we can address. I think it really fits in well. So I'm just going to read it off now. So, hello. I have learned a lot from your weekly Loopcast and look forward to listening to them. Thank you so much. We work hard on it. So I learned from the Loop email that the vote was 222 to 208 to pass a resolution condemning the recent attacks on pro-life facilities and churches. I looked up how the representative from my district, Sharice Davids, voted, and she voted against condemning violence. I wrote her an email and asked her why she voted not to condemn violence. I most likely will get an auto response since this is what happened multiple times in the past. My question for you is, why do you think that so many representatives voted against the resolution to condemn violence? This seems like something both sides could get behind. Best regards, Nancy. Thanks for submitting this, Nancy. Thought it was very appropriate for the episode. What do we think?
I'm totally with you, Nancy. One would think this is something that you could condemn no matter what, right?
I wanted them to push forward. We had called on them to push forward a stronger piece of legislation that would have demanded that the Inspector General of the Justice Department put out an actual report talking what steps have you taken to address these acts of violence.
Mm-hmm.
That would have that language would have had some teeth to it. And the thought was, well, instead of putting that piece of legislation, let's just find something where it'll be a little bit easier to find consensus. Let's just condemn the violence. But the thing is, it was a sense of the Congress resolution. The resolution said positive things about about pregnancy resource centers. Well, if you're Senator, I mean, she's not in the Senate, but Elizabeth Warren and her ilk, that she has supporters in the House too that think the same way. They can't acknowledge that there's anything positive about a pregnancy resource center because they think they're frauds.
Mm-hmm.
They want the Federal Trade Commission to shut them down for fraud because they're deceiving women. You want to kill your baby, and these guys want to save it. These guys are frauds. So they can't. That's why they can't support this kind of legislation. Hey, we should be against bombing stuff, right? We should be against violence, setting things on fire, right? Well, it's kind of a tough call because we don't like them. Right? It's not a tough call. You should totally be against violence. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
So it puts you in a tough rhetorical position. But here's a question then for you guys. So if the resolution was, say, hypothetically, there was a ton of violence against Planned Parenthoods, and in the language, it said that Planned Parenthood were doing good things for the community by allowing abortion to be accessible to the community. Could you, as a member of Congress, vote to condemn violence against Planned Parenthood in this case?
Well, see, the thing is that the people who support abortion claim they favor choice, right? So presumably they should have no problem with an organization that's trying to say, hey, you have a choice. Why don't you choose life? What's the objection? Unless what they really, really want is more dead babies. If that's what they want, then they're not really pro-choice. So that's what I think gets to the drive why they don't like pregnancy research centers. They're like, no, we want the abortion industry to have more money and we want more babies dead. Like
to
what?
grow. Yeah.
I mean, then you're not pro-choice. You're just pro-death. So, to me, that if you're truly pro-choice, you shouldn't have a problem with a woman choosing either one, right? We're the ones that are claiming, hey, by the way, this is murder. So we're not going to endorse the other side. But their side claims to be just in favor of whatever choice you want to make. Well, maybe they're not telling the truth then.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see, too. They're really, really trying so hard to change how they coin pro-lifers. Like, it almost makes people blush now. They don't say pro-life. They say anti-abortion.
Oh, I love that. I
actually
accept
just
it.
refuse to say the P word.
Yeah, I'm with.
I am anti-abortion.
Right. I don't know if they think it's a dunk.
Yeah, no, I don't know why they think it's. It was Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC was squawking about that. Like when a reporter just made a reference to someone, calling themselves pro-life, he's like, you can't say that. It's anti-abortion. Like, great.
Right.
Oh, and I loved his response. He goes, oh, no, I was just saying she was pro-life because that's how she identified herself. Like he came right back at her with the language of the left, how she self-identified as pro-life. And she just got really quiet for a second. Moving on.
There's a little bit of an awkward pause.
Yeah.
So
I'll be anti-abortion too. I don't mind. I am.
Final answer to Nancy. Yeah.
Okay. Final answer to Nancy. Yeah, I think, like Josh said, it's that in signing on to this particular piece of legislation, the way it was crafted, your representative would have had to also sign on to this praise of the work that pregnancy resource centers have done for the United States, for the local community. And that's just something your friend, what's her name? Charisse could not do. She could not go there politically. It was a charisse too far for Charisse.
Which, to be fair, would be a bridge too far if it would have made us praise Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, but we're consistent on this is the point.
Opposed.
Like we think murder is bad.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're not going to praise that.
Correct. In all cases, not just when they're unborn. So we were all together, all of Catholic Vote together in Washington, D.C. for the march. And I got some sage advice from the president of Catholic Vote, Brian Birch, on the podcast. He said, Tom, we have such heated debates here at Catholic Vote because we have a lot of very opinionated, intelligent, and good Catholic people here. And we want to bring those debates to the broader audience. Just talk about what we talk about internally. And so that really inspired me as I saw this come across the desk, it was a tweet from Father James Martin, often talked about, but for good reason. And so I'm just going to lay down the facts of what was talked about, and then we can go into as to why this is maybe a little bit problematic. So, an organization called the Catholic League on Twitter wrote an article, and the tweet said, "It is true that Pete Buttigieg is legally married, but that is a legal fiction." And then on top of it, you can quote tweet, and Father James, I'm going to throw it up on the YouTube if anyone wants to see it. Father James Martin said, "Pete Buttigieg is married, period." And of course, coming from a Catholic priest, that might seem a little bit problematic, as it is at odds with Catholic teaching and the church you're a part of. And then he responds with, "Surprised this got so much attention. Like it or not, Pete Buttigieg is legally married. You may disagree with same-sex marriage or not, but at Secretary Pete is married in the eyes of the state and his church as much as anyone else. To claim otherwise is to ignore reality." And then he wrote a lengthy article about how he got a lot of
A
attack.
very lengthy article.
This was very in line with our experience with Father James Martin. Josh, what were your 2 cents on this exchange?
Well, I mean, James Martin is an absolute masterful troll, and what I mean by troll is someone who puts out a statement on social media with the intent purpose of trying to get a whole storm brewing. He does it on purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Right.
He's not confused. He actually said, "I was totally surprised at how people reacted to this and made such a fuss. I just said the statement was true."
BS meter.
Yeah,
BS alert.
so he's a liar. I mean, there's no way he was surprised. Oh, I'm surprised. Totally
Shocking.
phony, total lie. He knows exactly what he's doing. So the Catholic League was pushing back at this, saying it's he might be in the eyes of the state legally married, but it's a total fiction that marriage is between a man and a woman, which is obvious opinion that everyone had up until 10 minutes ago. And so, what Father James Martin did is he just said, Pete Buttigieg is married. And that leaves it at that. And he sends that out to his 250,000 followers or whatever. And they loved it because he's got a following of people who like the mantle of Catholic, but hate actually what she teaches on everything. He's like the chaplain for the Church of the Sexual Revolution. That's really what he is. And so, right now, so what he ends up doing is making a statement like that. It's designed intentionally to elicit a thunderous negative response. And then he's like, gosh, people are so homophobic and so angry. And I'm like, well, okay, they're upset because, we're fighting in a culture war right now, not of our choosing. It's not like, if, I love to not have to go to war. I wish we had a country that, embraced the total normal Christian view of human anthropology, man and woman married together. But we don't have that. And the left is coming for our throats. And he's basically, like I said, the chaplain of the sexual revolution. He's absolutely endorsing all these horrible things. And then he does it in such a snake oil way where he's like, well, I didn't say I'm in favor of it. It's obviously clear exactly what he wants.
Yeah. Right. And if you read in the article, he actually says, he goes, I'm not challenging the church's teaching against same-sex marriage, which he always says that. And yet he regularly puts out these statements that can go either way that he knows is going to elicit the worst in people. I mean, look, if you're someone who goes on Twitter, finds Father James Martin and starts yelling at him that he's going to burn in hell, please stop doing that. You're just feeding the beast. Right. The best thing to do is to just copy and paste from the Catechism or from John Paul II, say, that's a lie. Here's the quote. Leave it, right? Don't get all worked up because he's not worth it. I mean Father James Martin is not worth it.
I'm going to push back on that. It is worth getting worked up about because, frankly, lay Catholics are upset and frustrated. Listen, it's about quality control, okay? So if Coca-Cola, if all of a sudden let's say in Wisconsin, Coca-Cola tasted like garbage, then everyone would go, what's going on? Why does this, I go in Wisconsin, I go to Illinois or Minnesota or Michigan, it tastes great. And then I go to Wisconsin, it doesn't taste like Coke at all. It tastes terrible. It's like flat. It doesn't taste sugary at all. I hate it. And so then people would say, what's going on? And Coca-Cola would swarm in and find out what's going on with the bottle distributors. Why aren't you using the right formula? Why are you saying why are you offering this? This is not what we are about. Get in line or you're out of the picture. And so what happens with the Catholic Church? Like some guy like this, James Martin, is a total heretic.
You make a good point.
He's pushing a false gospel, and he's just not only why is there no quality control? Why is the Jesuit superior or his archbishop or I don't know, the Pope, who happens to also be a Jesuit, saying, stop this, stop doing this. You're teaching a false gospel. But in fact, Pope Francis promoted him. So what does that say about our church? It's a total quality control problem. People, so other people come up to us and goes, now, wait a minute now, you're Catholic and you believe, the Catholic Church apparently teaches that marriage is between a man and a woman.
My family, yeah.
But what is with this guy here? He's like a priest that gets on Twitter. He's got a ton of followers and he says this kind of stuff. And why doesn't
or like, he seems really nice. Why are you so mean?
Well, there's
holding church
that, but then I think it's an ecumenical nightmare because people who might might be attracted to the Catholic Church and her traditions and her teachings, like, well, wait a minute now, why is this guy allowed to completely say whatever he wants to and still be considered a priest in good standing?
Our coworker Stephen brought up a really good point. I think this regards specifically to outreach ministries. It's his ministry. It is worth calling him out every step of the way because, like you said, there might be people's experience with the Catholic Church that's through the lens of people who are not promoting church teaching, or they're masterfully trolling. So, for the example, outreach thrives because it only reaches people that are vulnerable. So, if you're vulnerable and you read something from outreach and it's encouraging you as a trans individual, or it's teaching you, it's encouraging things that are against church teaching. They actually
you're fine in your gay relationship, right?
He actually hopes that you don't find it. That actual, well-intentioned, good Catholic people are not going to find it because then they're not going to expose it. As soon as people bring attention to it and it reflects poorly on them, that's when it gets taken down, right? Because it's like the jig is up. But if if only one side of the aisle is seeing that and consuming that, that might be their only experience with the Catholic Church. So that's why, for those wondering, we keep bringing them up. This is why we bring it up, right? Catholic Vote functions as a watchdog a lot of times because this is a horrible representation of Catholic Church. And he's going to come back to this. Who knows? He might even respond on Twitter. He might say, wow, that's really homophobic of you, LOOPcast. Wow, you must really
Catholic
hate...
Vote is lying.
You must really hate gay people. You must really hate me. It's not even about that. It's not about that. We know what you're doing. We know the game, and we're here to call you out at every single step.
Well, and again, I would like to make the point. It's not like someone, on the street corner who goes, I hate you Catholics as you walk into church. Like, just ignore that guy. He's just a crank. I mean, James Martin has over 300,000 followers on Twitter alone. He, like I said, he got promoted to the Vatican. He also appears on CBS. He's like the chaplain of the Stephen Colbert's Late Show or whatever. But
Colbert, yeah.
Is there a more influential Catholic priest in the United States than James Martin? I mean, you would probably say,
unfortunately,
I would say probably
Strickland.
No, I'd probably say, Father Mike Schmitz with his awesome podcast is probably the number one. But other than that, James Martin is way up there, and he's able to gain influence, and he's able to spread his message through mainstream media sources. He gets op-eds published everywhere. So, why don't you just ignore it? We can't ignore a problem. No.
Right.
Well, and just to be really clear, I want to be really clear. I was not saying that you should just ignore him. But what I'm saying is that he requires a firm and level handling, right? Yeah. Don't just go on there and put an emoji. Don't do it. Don't do emojis or gifs of people roasting in hell. Actually go in there, challenge and say, you're a liar.
Yeah.
I think to Tom's point earlier, what, like Stephen was saying, it's not even helpful for his own goals. In other words, James Martin purportedly is doing all this kind of stuff, as you say, to try to, be supportive of LGBT, teens. That's always, what about these kids under 18? Like, buddy, if you truly believe in the Catholic teachings on, human anthropology, that God created us male and female, and that, God has a plan for men and for women, which of course he disagrees with all that. So he's encouraging these gender theories that are at war with our own bodies, that are at war with our own souls. And so it's like you're just going to lead
that have real lasting consequences.
It's going to lead to despair.
It's
terrible, right?
Yeah, so it's like not even like we can just brush it off as like, oh, this is kind of insignificant trickery. Like the things that he allows and promotes ruin people for life, or it could seriously, irreversibly could ruin you. So we bring this up, and plus, as a priest with a lot of authority, you're actually held. I mean, all priests should be held to a higher standard, but he is a Catholic priest. You're wearing a collar. When you speak, you should speak in the tradition of like in your education as a Catholic priest. So for him to say he is married, that's cute semantics, but like, while it may not be, I don't know, by legal definition incorrect, it's not what you as a priest should be pushing into putting out. If
that's what you believe, take off the Roman collar, bro.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Go join the Episcopalians. They would love to have you.
Or just join the Jesuit. Oh, shoot.
Oh.
Sorry, I think we might be like the #1 Jesuit joke podcast out there.
I think 99% of Jesuits give the other 1% a bad name.
Oh, I named my son after a Jesuit. My son is named after Francis Xavier. And I tell him, you got don't you dare become one.
All right. Jesuits jokes. We got those out of our system for this episode.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Yeah. So we're going to move on now to so we don't often talk hockey, although I have an appreciation for hockey myself. But there was a Russian Orthodox hockey player. His name is Ivan Provorov. And I'm not great at pronouncing Russian, so forgive me on that.
How's your Russian, Tom?
Russian, brushing up, a little dusty. So he was a player for the Philadelphia Flyers, and he was asked about why he was not going to wear the Pride Night jersey with the rest of his team. He was the only member of his team to not do so. And he answered very simply, it's against my religion. I don't believe it. And I won't do it. And honestly, I don't want to hear any other questions about it. Like if you have hockey questions, ask me.
Yeah, I loved that.
I'll play the
clip. You have a hockey question, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'll run the clip.
It should be the end of the discussion, right?
Everybody, I respect everybody's choices. My choice is to stay true to myself and my religion. That's all I'm going to say. Like I said, that's all I'm going to comment on that. If you have any hockey questions, I would answer those.
Can you just clarify your religion?
Russian Orthodox.
Why are professional teams supporting what we normally call deviant forms of sexuality up until 15, 20 years ago? And it's like, it's again, the rainbow crowd doesn't just want neutrality. They want us to endorse it. It's not, they don't want just tolerance. They want our approval. And you know what? We don't approve. We don't.
Well, and guess what? So he didn't do it, and his jersey sold out.
Yeah.
On the NHL. And this is not, he's not, Sidney Crosby, or I don't know if we got hockey fans on the podcast.
And it's hockey.
It's hockey. That jersey sold out. I mean, I kind of want to buy a jersey. My only beef with it is that I'd be giving money to the NHL, which is, I think, one of the worst professional sports organizations when it comes to a lot of these woke causes. I almost wish that he was able to set up his own shop or something, because I would have loved to support that.
But the fan base, they sent a message to NHL.
What does that say? The fact that it's sold out, like that even kind of surprised me. Is it just a sign that everyone's kind of fed up with this thing? Like, is it people of religious faith that only did it? Is it some secular people who are like, yeah, I am kind of tired of having dumb stuff shoved down my throat for no reason? What do you think?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think that there are enough people out there paying attention who, when they see someone who's willing to stand up, I mean, the only guy on his team, I don't know how guy locker rooms are, but I imagine there's some social pressure going on there. For him to just be like, no, this is against who I am. It's against my faith. I'm not going to do it. I mean, you just got to admire that. Like, here's a man who's actually being a manly man.
Yeah.
So I would love to see the data analysis on who bought it. Were they all people of faith? Are there really that many Russian Orthodox watching hockey in the United States that they could buy out the guys' jerseys? I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, it was a great moment, just a really great moment. It reminded me, one of my all-time favorite movies is Chariots of Fire, back from the 1980s. You know, the story of the Christian missionary who was on the British track team, and he would not run a race on Sunday. And the movie just does such a great job. I'd encourage everyone to go watch it. Older movie, but it just does a great job of dramatizing the pressures that are put on these athletes to be role models, but also to kowtow to whatever the current political atmosphere is. I mean, they're getting pressure from big business, from the NHL. They're getting this pressure, and this movie is the story of a guy who would not bend the knee. And same, you know, kudos to Ivan.
I'm continually frustrated by the fact that more athletes don't just stand up for what they believe in. Like, if you think about it, for example, with the vaccines, if 15 quarterbacks in the NFL decided, I'm not getting this, and it's not going to happen, the league wouldn't have required it, right? If all of the hockey stars say, I'm not going to wear this jersey, like you're not going to force me to do something that doesn't align with whatever, they wouldn't force it.
Or the female swimmers, if the NCAA, if all those girls had refused to swim against Leah Thomas.
Correct. Like, I'm
not swimming.
I understand that you have to sacrifice something when you do that, but it's like, if everyone sacrifices together, then no one does, in a way, because then it's shown that it's important enough to people that people will back down.
Okay.
But instead, it's just the opposite. People just back down on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think.
But that's not how it works.
I do think courage is courageous, though. Sorry. I do think that courage is contagious.
That's deep. That was a deep sentence from Josh.
That was a tautology there. Yeah.
No, but yeah.
Is courage courageous?
So, you know, I do think it's important, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that this hockey player stuck his neck out and did the thing he thought was right. And I think is also right, obviously. But what I thought was just outrageous is that you had some of these sports reporters just maliciously attack him. One guy even said he should get on a plane and go fight for the Ukraine. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, just because he doesn't want to put on a rainbow jersey to celebrate, you know, LGBT stuff, you want to send him off to war? You know, it's ridiculous. Now, I will say this about, it is important to have strong political leadership too. Okay, so, you know, because otherwise, if, you know, he happens to be a hockey player, he's not super well known, but he's able to stand up and do what he wants. But oftentimes there are workers in the economy that can't be as brave, you know, because they don't have a multi-million-dollar contract.
They don't have a platform. Yeah,
and they just get shoved aside, right? So when the NHL, you mentioned it's such a terrible league, they put out this job wanted thing. They put out a job wanted application. They want someone to work for the NHL that would be a diversity person, and they had to be, you know, Hispanic, they had to be Black or American Indian or Asian or something like that. And Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is like, yeah, excuse me, wait, what? Like, you can't just openly call for a position where you discriminate against on the basis of race. And so they pulled the job application thing.
Racism.
So they pulled it, you know. And I think that's why we, you know, it's important for people to try to be as courageous as they are, sure. But ultimately, you need to have strong political leadership. And that's why I think, you know, you need to make sure you do quality control when it comes to electing candidates for office. I think that's why advocacy groups like CatholicVote are important. You know, we can bring this to the forefront and talk about this and represent people of all backgrounds, right?
Right. You need a strong media presence that will tell the story, right? Because I think of like back in Nazi Germany, so like Saint or Blessed Franz Jagerstatter, the father in Germany who would not sign the oath to the Hitler regime and who was ultimately martyred, right? I mean, if if more Catholics in Germany at that time had known his story and known what he was doing, that he was sitting in jail, refusing to take this oath, if that story had been out there, like you said, Josh, courage is contagious. And how many more people like him would there have been? And what would the outcome have been? How would history have been different? So I think political power, yes, and also a way for the stories to be known so that we can find our, people who are standing up and take inspiration from them.
Amen to that.
And it does remind me too of why people hate neocons so much. For example, like the George Bushes of, like, people were so frustrated that there was no political leadership on social issues like this, right? That's why people love Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis was like, Disney wants to say what to preschoolers? Like, no, that's not going to happen. And the George Bushes and all them, they're like, just cut taxes. We're going to stay out of everything.
Cut taxes and bomb countries. That's all we care about.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, those were the days.
So I'm glad. Hopefully we've moved on to a new political era where we actually can have to take some charge. And actually, thank you to the left for really pushing society way too far. To the
shout out to Obama.
Yeah, shout out to Obama for just taking us into a
pushing us so far.
So, before we move on to the Twilight Zone, I just want to bring up it's just starting. We're going to be able to give you much more updates as it comes. But the Mark Houck trial actually starts this week. Has started this week by the time this is released, and I just their family needs prayers, very intentional prayers. They're going up against a system that is clearly angled against people of goodwill, pro-life, and the same system that has turned a blind eye to all these church attacks. Instead, the Department of Justice has chosen to go after well-meaning people of good conscience who are protesting outside of abortion clinics. Mark Houck is actually one of quite a few that have been arrested with the FBI in their homes, flashing guns, crazy stuff for just protesting outside of these abortion clinics. So I just ask everyone listening, if you can just take the time now, please say a prayer for Mark Houck and his entire family. This is going to be a very important trial, I think, and set a really important precedent, hopefully, that can exonerate just innocent pro-lifers in the country. I think that's all we need to say on that. We will be updating you as that is a kind of ongoing situation. So we're going to move on now into the Twilight Zone. Josh.
Well,
Twilight Zone.
I mean, I guess I have to remind myself not to get totally surprised by these things, but our wonderful, say that sarcastically, Vice President
He can't even say it. Oh, come on, Josh.
She said she completely butchered the Declaration of Independence and edited out the right to life. I mean, you're that zealously dedicated to abortion. Like, oh yeah, that's inconvenient, Yeah. A promise we made in the Declaration of Independence that we are each endowed with the right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. So totally cut out the fact that we're not going to say the right to life, which is in that important sentence that's in the Declaration.
Not a big fan of the right to life.
Right. By the way, did you notice she also totally edited out endowed by their creator? Like, she cut out God too.
We don't need God and we don't need life, both of which are preconditions to enjoying liberty, but we don't need them. I know I had to replay the clip like 3 times because I didn't believe it. I'm like, even oh my God. Why are we even surprised?
The great understanding of the founding father generation is that our rights do not come from government. They don't come from us collectively together as like some sort of majority governing power. Like, no, you have the right to life. You have the right to liberty. You have the right to pursue happiness. Those rights are yours. They are endowed by the Creator. Right. No government of men can ever take that away. And that's, so when she's quoting from and editing out critical parts of our national heritage in the Declaration of Independence, dude, that is a declaration on everything we believe. Declaring war, a declaration of war on us.
Right. The thing that drives me absolutely nuts about when people who are like in the minority, racial minorities, fighting for their rights, they've been, historically disadvantaged, they've been enslaved. I mean, horrible things have happened to them. But the entire basis of protesting and working for a better civilization for all people, for rights, the entire basis of that is that the government, the policies that were in place, the people in power who held them down, were not the final arbiter of their rights, that government and power is not the source of the rights of African Americans. It's not the source of the rights of women. It's God. It's someone prior to government.
Right.
And now that you feel like you're kind of getting the power, you're the one in power now. Now you do away with the entire basis that got you to this point. It's just,
I know what you're saying, but like Kamala Harris could have, that same thing that she said could have been uttered by any number of lame white Democrats as well. I mean, the thing is, Joe Biden, if he said it, you'd have thought, maybe he's just kind of senile and getting old, because he butchers
forgot that
everything,
line,
right?
yeah.
You can't string it's like the Democratic National Convention. They didn't want to pledge allegiance to the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like that. They want to cut God out of their platform. So, we are seeing a rise, not just in the nuns, like people with no affiliation. Those people are obviously actively hostile to religion. It's not like, it's not my thing. You want to do it, whatever. No, I mean, that's what the whole church violence stuff is about. Like,
they want to erase it, right? They want it to be erased.
And important to note when she did this, her and Joe Biden both did this as thousands upon thousands of pro-lifers from across the country came to DC for the March for Life. Like, Joe Biden's a Catholic.
The anniversary of Roe v. Wade, right? This is on the anniversary.
Right.
She can't quote the right to life.
She can't. I mean, it actually would kind of be a contradiction, I guess. If
we would have called out the contradiction, but to me, like the Twilight Zone was like, woo, so scared of it you can't even talk about it. Like, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. And golly.
And the whole abortion thing was predicated upon eugenics. It was used against minorities. Eric, you were talking about minorities. Kamala Harris herself, minority. So it's just so sad to see
it is sad.
Such ignorant and malicious people. And
I think it's dangerous to say that it's ignorant. So this is something like Ben Shapiro is always saying like Kamala Harris is so stupid. And he's always saying like Karine Jean-Pierre, the world's most untalented press secretary, which is a cute line. Thanks, Ben. That's really, she is. However, I think that it's giving them short shrift. Like the things that they put out there are calculated and deliberate. This is, it's intentional. It's not just that Karine Jean-Pierre is untalented and can't say anything straight. She deliberately obfuscates. Yeah. So Ben, give her, don't do that.
But I'll give you a pass on Biden because I truly don't know.
We'll
give you a pass on that one. Everyone else.
Let's eat mysteries.
Right. Erica. For Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah. All right. So the immigration numbers were released for December 2022 this week from the U.S. Customs and Borders Protection Agency. In total, there were over 250,000 encounters at the southern border in December. And that's just continuing to ramp up. That's a 7% increase compared to November. But that's not the Twilight Zone for me. Like, we all know it's a disaster. But then I was digging a little deeper into the statistics, like following the story. And we'll be covering this more in the weeks to come. But the Border Patrol agents stopped 17 people at the southern border in December who are on the FBI's terror watch list. This brings the total number of individuals arrested at the southern border who are on the terror watch list to 38 since the current fiscal year, which started October 1st. But this is even more interesting. There were 98 terror watch list arrests in 22, 15 in 21, and only 3 in 2020. During the entire Trump, whatever it's called, presidency, I can't even talk anymore. During the entire Trump presidency, they were in the single digits every year, how many guys they were picking up from the terror watch list. Now we're talking, we're on target to be over 100 at the southern border this year. And just, again, interesting stat, in 2022, there are an estimated over 500,000, 600,000 getaways at the border. So people they estimate made it over the border and were not picked up. So you think percentage-wise, how many of those people were on the terror watch list? This, to me, just total Twilight Zone, total disconnect between listening to Mayorkas defending his record down at the border and what's actually happening on the ground, coming across with these statistical reports. So, like, guys, get it together, or we're looking at another 9/11. This is how they get across. This is how they get into the country, and the whole world knows it. This is really international news.
It's sad that the administration allows so much abuse. By not having a coherent border policy, like the amount of abuse that's coming across between like the cartels owning the border and coyotes profiting off of human trafficking.
Oh, it's absolutely terrible.
Terrible. Like, it's just such a bad, all around, such a bad situation to project such weakness that anyone could just come across at any time. To argue that that's not the case is just, you haven't been paying attention, I guess. And I'm just, it really upsets me that so much abuse is allowed. And it's really indefensible. That's your responsibility as the leader of the country.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's a story to watch. We're going to be following up on this. And hopefully with the new Congress, we'll get some action here.
Yeah.
But Twilight Zone, this is still going on. And the Biden administration is still in total denial about the level of the threat.
Yeah. So I think I have the most fun Twilight Zone. So I don't know if that's a win for me. But
you get a crown. You get a short king crown for that.
So,
most fun Twilight Zone.
Short king crown, Benedict XVI, rest in peace. Hope he's watching down on this podcast right now. He wrote a book in Italian called What is Christianity? That was released very recently, this past week. And so recently that people haven't really even been able to interpret it, I guess. And the book has some bombshells in it, man. I mean, he went out swinging on this one. So I'm going to bring up some of the things the book talks about. And we haven't even gotten really a full breakdown yet, which I think is totally the fault of mainstream media. I mean, if this was anyone else, this would be everywhere, all over the place. I mean, he's a former pope. So Benedict XVI in the book speaks of homosexuality and the fact that there are gay clubs in seminaries. So yeah, hear a lot of talk about the homosexual clubs, talk about there being very like open secret boyfriends, sexual deviancy out in the open in a lot of these seminaries, and just the fact that some of these people had wives and children, in some cases by their girlfriends. I mean, just crazy. I mean, that was what we've gotten so far, but I mean, it's crazy to me a few things. Like, okay, this bombshell drops, obviously critical of like the current pope and the current state of the church. And yet, why do we not have it published in English and have this everywhere?
It'll come in English.
Even if it was in Latin.
A week or so.
Right. But okay. But say if Pope Francis retires and he says or passes away and he says anything critical of, say, like, I don't know, the TLM or whatever, like this would truly be everywhere by now. Would it not? I mean, is that crazy of a...
Yeah, I mean, so like the Catholic left isn't going to want to publish this because it's calling attention to stuff that they would like to sweep under the rug. And then you have another problem with conservative, Catholic media, which oftentimes is a little risk averse. They don't want to really mention bad things about the...
That's an understatement.
They don't want to mention bad things about the church because they want people to be happy about their church. They want people to love their church and the church's teachings. But if you do love the church and her teachings, then you should be frustrated and upset when someone is causing great scandal. The answer is not to just kind of ignore it and hope no one notices it. That's not helpful at all. Right. So, I mean, Pope Benedict had a great legacy when he was Pope of trying to reform the seminaries. He understood this to be a big problem. He had done a lot of great work on that. And now it's just amazing to see some of this other stuff where he's just like, yeah, dude, this is a massive problem.
And Erica, you were talking about how he had so much hatred against him from the German church.
Right. I mean, I think for me and a couple of our other colleagues, like you were talking about, just our conversations that we have in the office, the chilling line was that, he wrote that he didn't want to publish. And after the misunderstanding, there was a book published on the priesthood by Cardinal Robert Serra, one of our absolute dear friends in Rome, Cardinal Serra. And Pope Benedict was supposedly mistakenly put on the cover. He didn't actually write very much or any of the book. It's unclear. But after that total sort of media feeding frenzy, he was like, I'm not doing it anymore. But he said he didn't want to publish anymore while he was alive, because he knew that the German church, not all of the bishops, but the cadre of German bishops who are schismatic, who are against church teaching, would breathe, and he used the word murderous, with murderous furor at him. And he knew this, that he was so aware that he wants this book of essays to be published after his death, because he knew what the reaction would be. And I think for me, like, at this point, no one should be like, oh, it's a bombshell that there were gay clubs and seminaries. We all know this. Like, if you lived through the scandals 2001, and again, the McCarrick in 2018, I mean, we're talking years now of knowing. Those were the pink palaces, right? That's what we call them, or the lavender mafia in the seminaries. And I have friends who were in the seminaries who suffered this and were put out of the seminaries because of their orthodoxy, because they did not want gay relationships. And so this is a real thing. It's not a surprise. The bombshell, like you said, Tom, I think, is that this is the Pope, the emeritus Pope, saying, yes, these things were happening. This is the crux of the issue in the church. This is the crisis of fatherhood. This is the crisis of the priesthood, is this total the scandal of having this stuff in the seminaries at their formation. So that's the bombshell here, and the silence of the media.
Yeah, my friend said, why didn't they publish this in English first? And I thought to myself, if you were working...
They never do.
You know, the book was probably worked on in Italian between Benedict and the people that were probably, you know, he's like maybe the secretary consulting with it. And if you've got this book, you're like, let me wait to make sure I get it translated in English before I get it out there. Yeah, no, dude, publish it. Click, submit, get it out there before something happens. You know, there's going to be, I mean, there are vipers in the Vatican that would try to do anything they could to stop this kind of thing from getting out.
Yeah, not so much the bombshell, but the miracle that this is actually coming to light and that we are going to have this in English very soon. That's a miracle, because the way it works, it could have just gone into the dustbin somewhere under the Vatican. They'll discover it in 800 years, you know, like,
yeah, but we've got it out there.
So much good, else is down there. And praise the Lord.
Well, I think that about does for this episode, packed. But for those of you still listening, I actually want to read this comment. Actually really genuinely touched me. It's on the Apple Podcast review section. Someone that titled themselves as Hate News, Love Loopcast, gave us 5 stars. And I'll give a live reading. I talked to Eric about this. Josh, you haven't heard this yet. So here's the comment. New listener, going to keep listening. Just started listening to the Loopcast right after the 2020 elections. I stopped listening / watching any news at all. While it helps my stress level, I'm much more relaxed. I have found I had no idea the important happenings in our country and church. This podcast is refreshing in that it keeps me informed and doesn't stress me out. Thank you for keeping me up to date on current events in a manner that appeals to my values. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's so thoughtful.
I don't know if everyone knows that so much work goes into this product, the Loopcast. So much work. I spent a lot of time editing it. We think a lot about what topics we're going to cover. Erica does an excellent job of researching. Josh saves all of his hottest takes for this podcast.
Thank you, Josh.
We appreciate you guys so much. And if you would do us the honor, if you think highly of this show, please go leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to. Share us with a friend. We really, really so much appreciate the little community we're building here at Catholic Vote and with the Loopcast. Just truly honored to be supported by you guys and put this together for you every week. Josh, do you have anything to say? You want to say you love them?
I appreciate the comments, and I think, you know, I think at Catholic Vote we're grounded by the sense that we feel an obligation, you know, to stand up and to advocate for these ideas. We believe in them. We know that the media and the culture, they're stacked. They're stacked against us. But that doesn't mean we have to become despondent or cranky. I think the answer is to be happy warriors and to understand that, like, if you truly believe in Jesus Christ, that this is his church, this is his world, and he wants us to be faithful, and he's not calling on any of us to be specifically to be successful. What he wants us to do, my friend said this, you bring the loaves and fishes to Jesus and he'll multiply them. So we do what we can, we put in hard work, and we let God multiply it. So, it's up to God. It's, what he wants to do with this podcast, with any endeavor that we work on. It's all dedicated in his name. So, we're not there's a lot of difficult things going on in the news, a lot of different, politics and that kind of stuff. We want to try to give it to you as straight as we can and honest as we can, because we're just like you.
Amen to that. All right. So that does for this one. Go keep the faith. See you in the next one. Bye, guys.